show. Hello there.
Hello, how are you?
Doing okay. Now, we've heard so many times immunity from the vaccine wanes over time. So I was sort of wondering how much protection a person who received their vaccine many months ago, perhaps their third shot, actually have against COVID-19.
It depends what you mean by protection. Protection against actual infection, not that much. Protection against transmitting to others, not that much. But protection against serious outcomes, hospitalization, and death, still a fair amount. So the jabs you got many months ago are keeping you alive and out of the hospital and keeping our system afloat. So it's not nothing.
Yeah, that is an important point for people to remember. But what are the elements that are not doing such a good job anymore? People might be thinking, wouldn't a fourth dose seem like a good idea?
It is a very good idea, in my opinion. So we have to remember that our immune systems have two arms, the humoral arm and the cellular arm. The cellular arm is T cells and B cells and all that fun stuff that prevent serious disease. The humoral arm that's the antibodies, and that stuff tends to be short-lived. And the humoral arm prevents actual infection from taking place. That's what's waning here. So the additional boosters give a real spike, no pun intended there, in our ability to produce antibodies and to keep actual infection at bay. So if we care about blunting transmission in our community, we should be looking at boosters more so. And the data is pretty compelling, especially data out of Israel that shows that people who got a fourth dose are much more likely to avoid infection and to avoid symptomatic disease and to avoid hospitalization and to avoid death than people who just got three doses. It's very compelling data, and the more time that goes on, the larger that divergence of curves, the more impactful that fourth dose is.
Can you talk to me about that, the longer it goes on? Because that is also sort of running through my mind as we're heading into the fall. How soon should this be happening if people should be getting that fourth dose?
Well, I mean, the guidance tends to be minimum 4 months since an infection or since the previous dose, because it takes time for your tissue to become less inflamed to accept the boost. But there's no magical period here. Sure, the longer you wait, probably the better response you'd get from the vaccine, but that has to be weighed against what's happening in the community. And right now in the community, we have B4 and B5 hitting the streets pretty hard and causing what looks like a seventh wave. So it's important, I think, to get immunity now so that we are ready come fall to blunt that probable higher wave when the schools open. That's why I'm advocating for fourth doses for everybody. I think now is the time, and I'm not sure why we're not doing it.
Well, that is the question that we keep coming back to, because right now, and correct me if I'm wrong here, even healthcare workers aren't eligible for the fourth booster dose.
Right, and it's not really based on a lot of science. We know that because lots of jurisdictions around the world have opened up fourth doses to a wider selection of people. I think it's based on a number of things. One is that this narrative that the crisis is over, the pandemic is over. The pandemic is not over. We just don't talk about it as much. Two is this feeling that maybe we have a better vaccine coming in the fall, the supposed bivalent Omicron-specific vaccines. That might be true, but there's no guarantee we'll have them in any appreciable volume and that you and I will be able to get them. So to my mind, it makes sense to get the existing vaccine. And then there's the sense that you don't need it because they don't work. And some of the initial data showed that a fourth dose gives you a modest improvement in reaction, in response. But the longer you wait after that fourth dose, the larger that divergence of curves. So the Israeli data shows that 28 days after that fourth dose, you are doubling your protection against actual infection. You're quadrupling your protection against death. In New York, one booster reduces your risk of death by about 86%, but that second booster reduces it by 99% versus not being vaccinated at all. I much prefer 99% guarantee of not dying than 86%. So I think it's also there's a matter of math here. So the way we typically advise whether or not to accept a vaccine is to look at the risk-benefit ratio for one particular group of people. So the risk of getting COVID, if you are a young person, depending upon your lifestyle, is whatever it is, but the risk of having a bad outcome from that infection is relatively small compared to the risk experienced by an older individual. So the risk-benefit calculus errs on the side of not advising the vaccine for a younger person. But that's only for that individual. If we look at the community as a whole, it makes sense to my mind to advocate for boosting for everyone to slow penetration of the disease overall.
So who is it that has to make that happen? Because if I'm understanding you correctly, there's just a bit of a lack of political will here, or perhaps a lack of desire to have a narrative that says, look, this is still going on and we still need these vaccines.
Yeah, good point. Who is making the decision? Well, our political leaders are. The province is free to make this decision without waiting for NACI to lay down a recommendation. But I understand that is what's holding this up, is waiting for NACI to actually recommend something. But they just offer guidance. They don't make rules. Quebec has opened it up to
like regardless of what NACI says, the government could do this. Is what
absolutely. And frankly, you could get one yourself if you're under 60 rather, if you have a note from your doctor saying that you need to. So there are ways around this.
Okay, wait a sec. I didn't realize that. So I actually didn't realize. So you could, in theory, like a GP, if you're lucky enough to have a doctor,
yes,
a doctor could say to you, look, I think this person should get the shot, and that's enough.
Yes, that is my understanding. If you have, a particular vulnerability to COVID that is not listed on the official list, then you can be advocate for that, yes. So you take that note to the pharmacist, and they will give you the shot.
Right, but you have to have some sort of immunocompromised.
Yeah. I know all the doctors listening hate me now because they're going to be flooded with requests from people.
I don't blame Raywat. I asked the question, but I didn't realize that. But I guess it is important to understand that a doctor cannot just do that for anyone. You have to have one of the conditions. If I'm understanding correctly. I guess the other question is, though, right now I think the overall uptake of the third dose was at 59%, which is of a concern. I think you've got 42% of kids between 5 and 11 that received the second dose. Would you be concerned, even if this was available, about the selling of the vaccine, for lack of a better term, the getting people to get that fourth dose?
Yeah, that's always going to be an issue here. I think we've really dropped the ball on how to communicate the necessities and the power of vaccines. There's a new analysis out just today that showed that these vaccines might be the most positively impactful medical intervention developed in the past many decades, if not ever. They've saved that many lives. That simple narrative has been lost somewhere. In fact, what dominates the narrative is on social media is people scared of the vaccine, hearing horror stories about adverse events that don't exist. We've done a poor job at combating the anti-vax messaging. We've done a poor job at showing the power of vaccination and of boosting to keep you well. And all it takes, frankly, is a concerted effort on the part of public health communicators, to whom I'm sympathetic because it's resource intensive and tiring, but that's what needs to be done.
Raywat Deonandan, thanks very much once again for being on the show.
My pleasure. Thank you.